Hello my friends! I will now tell you the crucial discovery that allowed me to build Mr. E and Lady O, my so exceptional speakers. I was in Fumi's apartment at 85 Rue du Faubourg Saint-Denis, shortly before she moved to the edge of the Canal Saint-Martin closer to my home. She had bought me. Our accounts have always been separate, but I've also given her several pieces. One of my little two-speaker sound systems. She showed me the hi-fi system she had for a long time. They were Sony speakers using a single full-range driver. It was the first time that I made this type of loudspeakers, capable, in theory, of restoring the sound from bass to treble. And there was no crossover. Always a problem. These speakers were the kind of speakers that a serious audiophile would immediately throw away. I still had the curiosity to listen to them at least once. Surprise! Also, with many gaps, the sound seems much more realistic, coherent, than with the small two-channel I had designed. Fumi had a piano next to the system. What we heard on her speakers sounded more like the real piano. I then thought about the fact that in nature, sound is not divided into low, medium, high. The eardrum of our ears is formed by a single vein of skin, as microphones have only one capsule to pick up the music. Logically, the first speakers had only one loudspeaker. So why has multiple loudspeakers on speakers developed? I see two reasons for this. The first is that the manufacturers have not succeeded in making this type of speaker sound extreme. The second resulting from the first. They realized that they could sell their production much more expensive, and they conditioned the amateurs by publicity and marketing to make them believe that the more loudspeakers there were per speaker, the more faithful the sound, and of course, the more expensive it is. I too fell for it with my 11 loudspeakers per speaker, or my 5-way multi-amplifier system. But already, having reduced the number of speakers to 2, I had noticed that the sound was much more realistic than with several per speaker. The quantity adds for the spectacular, but takes away from the feeling of truth. So I decided to focus my research on the single full-range speaker. At the end of my street, a store had recently opened. It was part of a chain of Canadian stores selling a junk of various electronics items, devices and components, including 13 centimeters full-range speakers from Realistic. They were mainly used for the automobile industry. As they were very cheap, I was able to throw myself into this new research by crushing them in all sorts of ways, which led me to break a number of them. I have tried many forms to reproduce the music in a way that feels real and have asked myself many questions. I realize that there are two main principles for reproducing music. The audiophile, where we try to prevent the walls of the box from vibrating. A beautiful sound, but not realistic enough. And the sound systems where everything vibrates. The sound seems very big, but breaks the ears. I heard speakers made of concrete. Nothing vibrated, but the sound was very small and distant. I concluded that you can't stop the speakers from vibrating. Then I remembered a principle of architecture saying that when there is a defect that cannot be masked, one must go in the direction of this defect, and on the contrary, exalt it. So we had to exalt the vibrations. That's what the sound system does in a way. So why isn't it good or realistic enough? My reflections led me to realize that the speakers that should reproduce all the music was a kind of instrument itself. But what characterizes an acoustic musical instrument is its shape. So there had to be a particular form that could realistically reproduce the music. I even had the intuition, because of my experiments, that it was a simple form. But which one? Wanting to push the logic to its maximum, I designed small speakers made of very thin printed circuit boards, epoxy glaze 0.8 millimeters thick. I left copper strips around the edges of the plates so I could solder them together with silver thin, harder than tin alone. On the inside, vibrating from all sides, the emissive surface was much larger than the membrane of the 13 centimeter speakers I was using. The first boxes were cubes of 15 centimeters side, then octagonal polyhedrons made up of these same square plates, increase of equilateral triangles of 15 centimeters of base. I even tried a polyhedral ball where on each side was drawn square or triangle in silver-plated copper, smaller and smaller. These objects were very beautiful. But several problems arose. What to put them on? I tried a large bar made of superimposed sheet of medium. This very dense reconstituted wood, 19.5 millimeters on the side, 1.20 meters high. Each end was carved into a pyramid shape. It was a difficult carpentry job to do in my apartment, with sanding that sent dust everywhere, and other wooden versions in the most curious shapes. I also tried an all-metal construction, airy, flexible, made of thin brass bars. How to 3D interiors? Empty? Tempting. But something was wrong. Filled? But with what? To touch the wall or not? How to treat the outside surface? To all these questions, there were many attempts with the same saying, do, undo, redo. All these experiences kept me busy for more than a year. The shapes were beautiful. The sound was beautiful, very transparent. Too much for my ears. Several of my friends liked it and bought systems from me. But I had to give up that direction and go back. The circuit boards were quite expensive and did not allow for large dimensions. These volumes were all closed, but eventually I realized that in order to get extreme bass, it was absolutely necessary for the sound to come out of a circular or laminar vent. The results not being sufficiently convincing, I also questioned my capacities, and I prefer to go back with more conventional form in thick wood, but with always a full range speaker. On the other hand, this experience was useful in making me discover the importance of the surface treatment of speakers and loudspeakers. Depending on whether or not a product is applied and on which product, the sound appears very different, more or less pleasant. Later, I thought of extending this idea to the walls and all the smooth objects in the room. We gain in softness, in dynamic, and in transparency.